Unity of Houston is an inclusive church where we seek to understand and live the teachings of Jesus and other spiritual masters. At Unity, we welcome all people from all spiritual paths and every walk of life. We celebrate the diversity of our city and of our world, and we teach love, tolerance, and oneness, seeking to live in harmony with open minds and open hearts.
Wherever you are in your spiritual path, you are always welcome at Unity. Join us and discover that the life of your dreams is already within you.
So when I was in undergraduate school, I was a communication major for a short time. And there's one thing that I remember more than anything else from all those classes. There was a philosopher named Osmo Weo, and he had a philosophy. He said that one cannot not communicate. Even when you decide to say nothing, you are communicating volumes about what you think, about what you feel, and about what you believe. Well, if you take that thought into the spiritual realm, into the big, vast universe, then I would say also that we cannot not fulfill our destiny. Sometimes the hints we get from the universe are tiny. We just get little clues along the way about what we can and should be doing. Sometimes the clues are huge. A few years ago, I had a dream. In this dream, Spirit told me to live the next year of my life as if I would never experience those calendar dates again. It said, don't prepare to die, but work everything in this year. Everything you want to do for yourself, every goal you ever had, anything you need to say to loved ones, any legacy you want to leave, do it in the next 365 days. Well, I loved Henry David Thoreau, and I loved Walden all the way back in high school. So I thought, wow, this is my opportunity. I'm going to live Walden without going to the woods because I don't like to get dirty. The universe knows me perfectly. So I got up that morning and started by writing down what the dream told me. And in the process, while I was living the experience, I wrote about it. And then after I wrote about it, I've taught courses on it. The result was my first last year. And while I was teaching workshops on it, I learned something interesting about people in general. I discovered that there are generally two kinds of people in the world. There are those people who know exactly what their passions are, and they know exactly what their purpose is, and the fun of their journey is being able to fulfill it. But more interestingly, there were many people who did those workshops who would stand up and say, you know, I've never figured out what my passion is. I like a lot of stuff. I'm good at a lot of stuff. I've had great successes. But there's never been one thing that told me this above all else is my passion, and this is my purpose. The exciting part of that message, though, is that it doesn't matter. Even if we're not clear about a specific passion or a specific purpose yet, we are already on our life's journey. We are always on the journey. You know, I've always liked books and I've always collected books. And when I was a kid, I used to collect Charlie Brown Peanuts paperbacks. And they're just a compilation of the comic strips that were in the newspaper. Well, some of you may remember this, but in the 1960s, Charles Schulz did a series where he took the regular characters of Charlie Brown and Lucy, who were normally middle school age, and he did a whole series of them as toddlers. Well, in one book that was just a collection of those kids as toddlers, one of my favorite comic strips had Lucy in a playpen. And in the first panel, she's just looking up from the playpen, and she says, hey, let me out. And in the second panel, she's climbing out of the playpen, and she's thinking, hey, let me out. And in the third panel, she's climbing down the outside of the playpen, thinking, hey, let me out. And then in the last panel, she's walking down the hall, she looks around, and she says, hey, I'm out. Many people in this life are living their journey that exact way. They're continually looking to something or somebody else or some other power, saying, show me, or do this for me, or help me, when they don't even realize all along they are doing the work of their spiritual journey. Being happy on the journey requires our attention. So our ultimate quest is not figuring out what our purpose is, and it's not figuring out whether we're going to be fulfilling our divine destiny, because we are. Our ultimate quest is staying spiritually awake. That's the quest. So how can you tell if you're spiritually awake? You will do big things that feel profound. Or you will do simple things with profound feeling. So how do you start this journey? How do we begin? Good news, we're already on it. We started at birth. My most recent book is Divine Destiny, A Dialogue with God. And in this Divine Destiny dialogue, I asked God some of the big questions that I was grappling with. My first last year was more about living my life. Divine Destiny was more about, I want to answer the big questions. I really want some answers to this. And so one question I asked in my dialogue with God was, why were we born? And the answer is that our life is an answer to a prayer. And when I got that answer, I thought, wait a minute. So you mean the minute I'm born, I've answered the prayer? Does that mean I've fulfilled my destiny already? I mean, it's already a done deal by the time I'm born? And God said, no. Our being born is the answer to somebody else's prayer. What we do with our life is the answer to our prayer. Everything in the outside world is a mirror of what's going on inside of us. Author T. Harv Eker calls it our psychological blueprint. And in his book, in one of his books, he talks about this psychological blueprint, and he gives this example, which is kind of clever and very memorable. He said that many of us might have an idea to write a letter. So we type the letter in the computer, we print it out, and we look at the paper, and we proofread it. We notice there's an error. Most people, he says, will take an eraser, erase the word, write it incorrectly, press print again, print it out again, look at it, and not understand why it isn't any different. So we think, that didn't fix it. So we take white out. Very beautifully, very neatly, we white it out, let it all dry, we write the right word in, fix it again on the final copy, and then we press print. Prints it out, it's still the same. Why does that happen? Because everything in life is an inside job. It's exciting to be on the journey, but Will Rogers used to say, even if you're on the right track, you'll get run over if you just sit there. The joy is not at the end of the journey. The joy is in the journey now. Therefore, enlightenment is not a goal. Enlightenment is a condition. Robert Pirsig said, the only Zen you can find on the tops of mountains is the Zen you bring up there. We don't reach enlightenment, we claim it. That means we can claim it now. Heaven is not a destination. It is a perspective. One of our favorite movies, and I imagine many people's favorite movies in this room, is Field of Dreams. And for those of you, just a brief recap, at the beginning of the movie, Iowa farmer Ray Kinsella is out in his cornfield. He hears a voice that says, if you build it, he will come. Then he gets the vision that he's to build a ball field and Shoeless Joe Jackson will show up. Well, in the scene in the movie, he builds the baseball field, Shoeless Joe shows up, and at the end of one of their first encounters between Shoeless Joe and Ray Kinsella, Shoeless Joe turns to him and he says, is this heaven? And Ray says, no, it's Iowa. We don't arrive in heaven, we choose it. That means we can choose it now. In doing research for that concept, I discovered that nearly all faiths and spiritual traditions have a similar story about how humankind had and lost paradise. To punish humanity, a divine character of some kind decides to hide heaven so that we really have to look for it to find it again. In the Catholic Church, that divine character is a king. In the Native American tradition, that character is an eagle. In the Hindu faith, it's Brahma. But in most faiths, it's just listed as God. And sometimes, in some of the legends, God is one individual entity. Sometimes God is a whole committee of people deciding where to hide heaven. Well, the committee gets together and they decide, you know what, we could hide heaven on the top of a mountain, at the bottom of the sea, or deep in the earth. But eventually, humanity will come up with the technology to transcend those limitations and get there, so they wanted to make it even trickier. So the conclusion, of course, was that God or any divine entity hid heaven inside us. In Luke chapter 17, verse 21, it states, "Nor will people say, 'Here it is,' or 'There it is,' because the kingdom of God is in your midst." Some versions of the Bible rephrase it that the kingdom of God is among you. It is here with you. It is within you. Traditional religions refer to heaven as a place, and sometimes as a state that we can reach once we complete this physical life, or, in karmic terms, after several physical incarnations. But Jesus said, "The kingdom of heaven is within." You're carrying heaven around with you. You're on your journey of divine destiny. So how do you stay spiritually awake on your journey? Not long ago, our daughter-in-law gave a speech in front of a large congregation at her university. And the one thing that I took out of that speech that I loved most of all was that she said, the most important thing we need to know to fulfill our mission in life is to know our why. Once you know your why, nothing can stand in your way. Nothing can make you doubt what you're doing because you know why you're doing it. From that perspective, you can say here and now, I am complete. I am whole right here, right now, exactly as I am. In Divine Destiny, I distinguish between the divine us, which is our soul, and the human us. What I was surprised to discover in the course of writing the book is that one is not better than the other. In fact, one cannot fully realize itself without the other. I also grappled with the difference between what we know spiritually versus what we know intellectually. Before I wrote the book, I thought spiritual knowing was better and more powerful than intellectually knowing. But just like the spiritual us and the human us, one type of knowing reaches its full potential only by working in tandem with the other kind of knowing. Charles Fillmore, in his 12 Powers, says all of this begins with faith. In the course of writing Divine Destiny, I watched an old movie from 1975 called The Hiding Place. And it was a biographical work based on a true story of Corrie ten Boom. She was a Dutch watchmaker during World War II who hid Jews in her home during the Holocaust. Her family did. Well, eventually, they were caught. And their father was sent to one concentration camp, and Corrie ten Boom and her sister were sent to another concentration camp. Throughout this time, she kept affirming that she was a Christian woman who knew that God was with her. And this was 2/3 into the movie. And if you know anything about writing books or writing movies, you know that there's a big climactic scene that everything's leading to. So I kept watching for her message. It's like she kept affirming her faith. She said, I'm a woman of faith. God is taking care of things. God is taking care of things. So I kept waiting for this big, dramatic scene where they would be liberated. They would be freed of all the torture they were going through and the abuse they were going through and the death that they were seeing. And as she kept affirming, she got weaker and thinner, and then her sister got weaker, and then her sister got sick, and then her sister died. And I kept waiting for this big, liberating scene where I would say, see, it proves it. A man or woman of faith can move mountains. We can change the physical world. But in the course of this movie, and in the course of her book, that didn't happen. And I was really let down at the end of the movie. I thought, wait a minute, what does this say about faith? So I grappled with the thought of this movie for quite a while afterwards. And then it occurred to me, the more I thought about what she said and how she said it when she affirmed her faith, I saw the light of God in her eyes. And it occurred to me, after thinking about it for quite a while, that her liberation was an inside job. It didn't matter whether she was set free physically or not, because spiritually she knew her why, she knew who she was, and she was already free. Our spiritual journey and all the loving relationships that go along with it are eternal. When we're awake and alert, we can see the signs of support that help us advance and evolve. Those signs may come from other people we know in this world. Sometimes they come from people who have already gone before us. This past February 12th was the 3rd anniversary of my mother's death. Normally, on that date, my family gets together and goes to my mother's favorite restaurant, and we honor her life by going out to dinner and reminiscing about my mom. Well, this year was a different year. My sister and brother were both out of town. They weren't available. And my dad had had an accident where he injured both of his legs, and he was in physical therapy and was not able to leave the house. Well, we still wanted to honor my mom, so Jerry and I came up with an idea. One of the things that we used to love to do with my mom and dad years ago was play pinochle. We'd go there on a Friday night. Jerry and my dad would drink wine. My mother and I wouldn't. We'd play cards till 4 or 5 in the morning. Had the best time ever. And it always started by our swinging by the KFC not far from my parents' house, and I'd pick up a bucket of chicken, and then we'd take it to the house and we'd eat before we'd play cards. Well, my mother was very meticulous. She was very meticulous about everything she did. And so before we would sit down to dinner, she would take the bucket of chicken and she would display everything on the kitchen counter. She'd put the bucket of chicken there, she'd have the rolls there, the mashed potatoes there, the coleslaw there. And one thing Jerry and I noticed that she always did and never said anything about it. She took a paper plate, set it on the ledge beyond the bucket of chicken, and she always dug into the bucket of chicken and took out a chicken leg and put it on that paper plate for herself the next day because that was her favorite part of the chicken. After she did that, that's when she called us into the kitchen to come serve ourselves and get our stuff. So this time, this February, Jerry and I went by, and instead of playing cards, because it takes 4 people to play pinochle the way we usually played it, I decided I'd bring over some scrapbooks, and we would just reminisce about my mom and look at old pictures. So Jerry and I went by KFC, and I went into the kitchen, and I got my dad's plate already, because he wasn't able to move much. I got my dad's plate, Jerry and I got our plates, we sat down, we ate the chicken, we opened the scrapbook, we reminisced about my mom, had a great experience reminiscing and visiting about mom. At the end of the evening, I decided to clean the kitchen. I went back into the kitchen, I looked in the bucket of chicken, and there, inside that bucket of chicken, was a single chicken leg. In that moment, because I was spiritually paying attention, I knew Mom was affirming that she recognized and appreciated that we were honoring her. Yes, from beyond the grave, my mother talked to me through a chicken bone. But the idea of bones reminded us of another favorite memory we had. When our daughter Rebecca was living with us, we used to take driving trips sometime. And we would all pick our favorite CDs and bring them in the car so we could listen to the music together. Well, one of our favorite songs was called These Old Bones. It was from Dolly Parton's Halos and Horns album. And in general, the gist of the song is that it's the story of a girl who visits an old woman in the mountains who can foretell the future by psychically reading old bones. The main stanza says, "These old bones will tell your story. These old bones will never lie. These old bones will tell you surely what you can't see with your eye. These old bones I shake and rattle. These old bones I toss and roll. And it's all in how they scattered, tells you what the future holds." But the last stanza contains several startling revelations. In one, the old woman confesses to the girl that the bones are only a prop. As the girl leaves, the old woman whispers to her, "You just remember that the magic is inside you. There ain't no crystal ball." So where was this message from my mother on the anniversary of her death? It wasn't in a leg of chicken from KFC. The meaning was in me. The meaning is in each of us. And our divine spirit will teach our conscious minds lessons through symbols that we alone can understand. All growth requires faith and courage. For our own growth, you will, any number of times, have to muster your own courage to do what your soul is encouraging you to do. When I teach my writing students and clients about writing, I say in the first draft, you must bare your soul. You can decide later, before you share the manuscript with anybody, whether you want to leave everything in, but when you write that first draft, bare your soul, because only then will you find the truth of who you are and what you really have to say. While writing Divine Destiny, I had to test my own advice. On a Friday, I wrote about my inner sanctuary, the place that I go in meditation. I describe it in the book as I was writing my first draft. And it was a very personal and heartfelt chapter where I really felt that I bared my soul. Well, when I started writing the book, because it was a dialogue with God, I decided I wanted to leave it pure. It's like whatever showed up on the page, whatever came through me that I had to say, I wanted to leave it as cleanly as I could without revising it, without fixing it, without changing anything. But I have to admit, on that Friday, after I finished talking about my sanctuary, I felt a weekend of panic. I felt raw and I felt vulnerable. And I debated for the first time in the right process of writing that book whether or not I should actually leave that in. Then the next Monday, I started writing the next chapter. Here's how it began. Good morning, God. Good morning, Raj. You had some great revelations this weekend. Get right to them. Reflecting about what I shared concerning my sanctuary, I felt vulnerable. How so? Having other people read about it seems very, very intimate. Why might that be a problem for you? I'm anticipating judgment from others. Which led you to doubt leaving the previous chapter in the book? Yes. You will keep hearing the lessons until you learn them. What do you know, Raj? Do not judge and let go of the doubt. Concern allayed? Somewhat. You remind me to recognize what I'm feeling. Right now, I'm feeling ashamed. Of what? One quality I value is my loyalty. By worrying about leaving in the information about my sanctuary, I feel as though I have not been 100% true to you. Why? Because I consider deleting part of this very sacred dialogue between you and me out of fear of being judged by others. You do realize you're projecting here. By assuming others will judge you, you beat them to it by first judging them. When you resort to judgment, Raj, you abandon love. Your divine destiny, everyone's divine destiny, is to become love. That's bigger than just becoming loving. Strive to feel love so encompassingly that you become it. be it so pervasively that there is nothing else. By being here today or watching here tonight, you are fulfilling your divine destiny. If you had decided to go right home from work or not come here tonight or not tune in with us on Facebook, you would still be fulfilling your divine destiny. But the difference, the people who are here in this room or are watching us online are here and working on staying spiritually awake. The power and joy in this life's journey comes from being spiritually awake to where you are and who you are. When you know that, and you know that, you recognize exactly where and who you are. Is this Unity of Houston? No, it's heaven.
Thank you for watching this message today. I'd like to invite you to join us in person here on campus at Unity of Houston for Sunday morning or Wednesday evening services. If you can't be with us here on our campus, you can still join us live on Facebook or on our website, unityhouston.org, Sunday mornings at 11 a.m. Central.